Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Danielle Clark. You're here with Kate Stacom. She is an evidential psychic medium. She is a friend of mine, an intuitive soul coach, and she is a licensed therapist. We are here. This is a recorded special episode. We're going to be here hanging out and going deep for an hour on all things about accepting our intuitive selves. This episode is for you if you're trying to get comfortable with your psychic abilities, your intuition, your spiritual connection. This is an episode for you if you're thinking about coming out of the spiritual closet. And this is a spiritual episode, especially for those who might be grappling with, well, I'm a left brain person, and how do I incorporate this right side brain into me? So we're really excited to hang out. We do have some questions prepared, but we're also just going to let this flow and let spirit take the wheel. Kate, thanks for joining today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here and be with Spirit. Excited to see where this takes us today.
I love it. Me too. And what I always try to say for all of my episodes is the information that we're going to exchange is important, but it's also just the energy, right? Like that energy of healing, of acceptance, of connecting with spirit. So I invite everyone, yes, have a notebook if you want to take some notes, but also just sink into the energy. This would also be a really good time to consider following me at Dr. Danielle Clark. And Kate, if people want to learn more about you or follow you, where should they find you?
Sure. It's katestacom.com, STACOM as in Mary, and on Instagram, just Kate Stacom.
Yay. Okay, perfect. All right, so let's get into it. Kate, I'd love for you, and I'm just so excited to learn new things about you too. I start, just tell me about you. Like who is Kate? What's your personality? What roles do you have in life? All of that good stuff.
Sure. So I always feel like I have to sort of start when I was younger. I was often identified by teachers, and random people would come up to my parents and say that I just have such a bright light. And, I think that's something, we can certainly dive into this, but that I dimmed for a really, really long time. And recently I'm coming back into my own, and it feels so good. I am a mother of two. So I have a 7-month-old and then a 3-year-old.
And they're cuties, by the way. Cuties.
Yeah.
You already did that though.
Adorable. And of course, a wife, as well. And so those roles, I think for a good amount of time, especially after my first was born, she had a pretty complicated birth and first year, that, I felt a little bit more distant for my own self. And that's, I think looking back, that's where spirit was leading me. And I had to be there, but it's been so refreshing to kind of move back a little bit and reclaim my light. So that's where I'm at. Finding myself again feels good.
I love it. Well, thank you for shining your light on us. We have similarities. And I didn't know that about your daughter and her health challenges. My son, the same way. He was born a preemie, 3 pounds, 13 ounces, and had a series of physical challenges, a hole in his heart. He had a double hernia. He had a tethered spinal cord. Like the list actually goes on and on. And, it was an interesting time in my life because of a few reasons. One, I don't feel like I connected with my baby the way society made me feel like I should. He was in the NICU and he had nurses taking care of him, and it made me feel so insecure. It made me feel so detached, so inadequate. I also put a lot of guilt on myself. So that's interesting that we share that. And I do think, of course, that mama journey helped shape my intuitive self, or the way I help others in this world.
For sure. And just to touch on that, I think, that's so helpful and important to think about how the hard times really do, right? They help us to dig even deeper. And to share, in case this is of course applicable for anybody, my daughter had a congenital diaphragmatic hernia, which is basically, a hole in the diaphragm, and all the organs shift up and impact lung development. So she was intubated immediately after birth, and also spent a very good time, a lot of time in the ICU, surgery too of life. So, as a mom, exactly, there's that full surrendering. And when talking about her story, and it is her story, right? I was along there with her. I always talk about how much it helped me to surrender and to dig, and just seeing spirit through it. Only helped me grow, to being able to be where I am. So
I agree. It's all perspective, right? You can take that why me, right? And of course that pops up from time to time, regardless, but or you can take those dark times or those times that you don't understand and say, okay, let me open my heart. Let me open myself up to a higher power to understand, for sure. I love that. So now I'm curious, as we're talking about parenting, how does you've been on this journey of understanding your intuitive self and getting comfortable with what that means for you. How does that look in your parenting? Have you done anything different? Or are you maybe wrestling with how to say something or do something? What does that sound like?
It's such a funny question, because it's exactly where I am right now. I would say is my daughter being 3 has really shifted things, because there's a lot more questioning, right? A lot more questioning about the world, about how the world works. Emotions. She's very, very in tune with emotions. So, in just terms of talking about this, I have been thinking a lot about how do I want to bring my intuitive self into parenthood. And honestly, for me, where that shift has happened is just in my daily life. I notice myself just trying to be a lot more present and in tune with my children. Children are incredibly intuitive, right? And and they know exactly what they need and when, right? And so trying to just go down that road with them and be with them, like heart to heart present, is really, I think, for me, at the foundation of parenthood. But it is so interesting, especially as a psychic medium, as she's starting to ask those questions, like, when does that come into play, right? And when do we start having those conversations? But stay tuned. I'm certainly still trying to figure that out. How about for you, Danielle? In terms of
same thing. It's always like still trying to figure it out. My son is 16, and I really have only leaned into my spiritual self for about 4 years now. And so it was interesting when he was first born into his life, we actually intentionally didn't oversaturate him with any kind of a religious concept. We'd go to church every now and then, talk about God, universe every now and then, but not a central part of our life, because it wasn't a central part of my life or my husband's life. And we really did make the decision where we wanted him to go into the world with an open canvas, if you will, and get curious about the things that he wants to lean into, as opposed to being told, you're a Catholic, right? Or you're a Protestant, right? Not giving him that label. And interesting enough, he did find a calling to explore, I guess I'll call it his Christian roots. And he's really found his personal connection with Jesus, which is cool, because I don't have that. And so for him to have that, right, is pretty neat. And today it's funny. It's really us getting comfortable with when somebody asks, what does mom do for work, right? Do you say life coach? Do you say psychic medium? Do you say business professor? I'm also a business professor here at 2 schools in Florida. And he was uncomfortable about it a few years ago, and he'd kind of keep it on the DL. But interesting enough, actually, he's recently just naturally started saying like, oh, my mom's a psychic medium and business professor. And so it's so nice to show that he's gotten more comfortable with what I do. He understands the healing power. It's not, I'm going to say it's not his cup of tea, but he likes hearing about what I'm doing. But he definitely likes I'm going to call it the guardrails of traditional religion, but he's still very open and proud of me. So we're always trying to figure out how we connect and how we can continue to support each other's spiritual journey, even though it's a bit different, him and I.
Definitely. That's, yeah, so beautiful. And how I think, as we all grow, we change and that relationship changes, right? And our interactions around spirituality changes and grows.
Yes.
Yeah, it's ever moving, it's fluid. And I think there has to be the expectation that that is the case, right? That will always be the case. Yeah.
A good example for me is my dad was Catholic, and growing up, God really was like a man, a white man, right? Like, and going to church was like this awkward, when do I sit? When do I stand? How do I sing? And it was just, God just ended up having this really yucky feeling to me as a kid. Like it almost felt like something I had to do or something I didn't understand. And up until very recently, just as an example of one of my many spiritual shifts, I would never use the word God because I didn't feel connected to it. It was always like universe. I believe in universe, like God, like no way, yucky, right? Like get that guy out of here. And again, talking about how we should allow ourselves to shift and change. Now I find myself using the term God more because I've scrapped those limiting beliefs from my childhood experiences. And as I create the vision and the feeling of God for myself, I love him, her, they, like, I can't even describe how beautiful that energy is. And so it is interesting. Allow yourself to morph and change, I think is perhaps one of the golden nuggets of this conversation. Is a big part that others can do to accept their intuitive side is to realize like you're always going to be unlearning and relearning and not to just stay stuck, because you're never going to accept yourself if you just stay in one lane.
Exactly, right. And in terms of helping others on their journey and then helping you, right? Differences help us grow.
Yeah.
And it's really reminding me of a conversation that it sticks with me to this day. I was in high school and I was a very, I stand behind my word. I'm very passionate. And
Yes,
I can come across very strong. And I remember this distinctly, and it was with my parents, but, again, just a reminder coming back that, we're with the right parents and we're with the right children, right? We're all in this together and we grow together. And we were talking about religion. I also was raised Catholic, or, more so my parents. And we were talking about the notion of heaven, and, a lot of people within the Catholic religion only believe that Catholic people go to heaven, right? So there's this like exclusivity. And I remember point blank saying to them one time, well, what if you grew up in India? So that just makes you not go to heaven? So just because you landed on the earth, right, in India, right, for instance, this is random. I'm sure I was learning about world religions, and they actually paused. And I remember, right, them really pausing and saying, oh, it wasn't that notion. There was that notion of, should I, like that, based on where you live, that's sort of where you're drawn to, right? It's your community. It's the soul of the community, and it's not exclusive. So
I love that you were aware enough to notice. It sounds like your parents were open enough too, again, to consider something new, right? That's great. Yeah. And I like like the concept, that's how we learn, right? So sometimes we need somebody to break our reality or our perceived understanding of something. Here's a question for you, because we've come here today to talk about like accepting your intuitive gifts. Maybe some people listening aren't sure where they land on their spiritual journey. Can you have intuition without spirituality? Like, what's the difference? How do they intertwine? What's your thoughts on that conversation?
It's a beautiful question. And I believe you can have both. Don't restrict yourself from tuning in to your intuition just because you don't feel connected to a greater sense, of spirit. So I absolutely don't, I believe they're exclusive. I believe they also can be married beautifully. But intuition, to me, I think we all have it, right? That is just an innate sense. We're all born with it. In a sense, it also really helps with survival, right? Our intuition, it's our gut instinct, that we talk about in society, and knowing, like I always think of the instance of the fight or flight, right? And if we're walking down the street and something just doesn't feel right, we sort of get that gut instinct, and we move to the other side of the road, and a car crashes into the sidewalk on the other side, right? So I feel intuition is just at the basis of who we are, and it's so innate. Whereas spirituality is just this greater sense. It's greater sense of the world, and how we move through it. So again, with that marriage, right, as we're more in tune, we're more able to access the spiritual sense, right? The greater sense of why are we here. And so I think in that way, the more we spend time with our own selves and really tuning in and seeing what happens, the more we focus on that, then it all becomes clearer. I think it brings us to a sense of enlightenment. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It brings it out. Yeah. I completely agree. I think intuition's really neat because it's the power within, right? And yes, there's a bigger life force out there in my belief system, but we're our own life force, right? And however you want to look at what's operating us, or how we're connected, for those listening, that's okay if you don't identify with the spiritual, identify with your power, right? And like you said, your innate ability. And it's all different words, right? I like how you said, gut feeling. Sometimes people hear the word intuitive and they're like, okay, this is too woo-woo, right? Like, and it's like, okay, like we'll just shift the word, similar to I'm not saying God, right? Yeah. But if you lean into these concepts and also get comfortable with these concepts and feel comfortable to play or stretch with meanings or ideas, it becomes more comfortable. So I agree. Anybody listening, absolutely, you have an intuition. And I think it's so important. Yes, your connection to universe, or even nature, right? Like whatever that outer external connection is, maybe it's community, maybe it's nature. I don't think it necessarily has to be the unknown. It can just be like, okay, I know this can definitely help, because it's more power to activate your own power, right? And I always tell people, when people, reach out, let's say they're making a decision and they're like, well, how do I trust my intuition? Right. I get that one all the time. And I want to know what your thoughts are. But, a few things that I share is one, we have to keep ourselves healthy. Like it's just back to basics. Like if we think of ourselves as a tool and we want to trust the gut feeling, like everything needs to be operating effectively. So we can't be running on 3 hours of sleep. We can't be sick and depleted, right? We can't be like over caffeinated, because then like the compass of us isn't working. So the intuitive side, that innate flow is rocky, or it can teach us something that's not true. It can say, okay, we should be scared or worried, but that's only because something else is rocking us, right? And then I also share with people of tapping into your intuition is when tapping into your intuition, it's important to understand what it sounds like and feels like. When I work with my intuition, it's almost like a flow. It's easy and it's pretty quick. It's like, go down that road or don't go down that road. But there's not an abundance of emotion attached to it. It's not like, don't go down that road. Like it's just wise and simple. And I think my ego fear voice is that, if you go down that road, this is what's going to happen, right? Or if you do this, this is what's going to happen. And if I repeat myself, or if I flounder, or if I look like I do now, it's a sign of like, okay, that's probably my ego and not my intuitive self. How does that show up for you?
Absolutely. And I talk, I'm trained in dialectical behavior therapy also as a therapist. And so we talk a lot about the connection between our mind and our body, right? And of course, the cognitions come into play there, but that when the fight or flight is activated, right? So when our sympathetic nervous system is activated, we are not in tune, right? We are not present. We cannot think straight, right? Yeah. Because our body is only focused on survival, like plain and simple. That's a beautiful thing, right? I always say we need that. Anxiety, breeds from the fight or flight. So in essence, sometimes that can be a real survival, instinct, but it does, it loudens everything. It makes things louder, right?
Yeah.
And our intuition is that small whisper. And so when we are activated and when our fight or flight is moving, for many people throughout the entire day, right? We're not with ourselves. We're not going to be tuning in. We're not going to notice that little whisper saying, let's cross the road right now.
Yeah.
And so it's hard. And I think there is, that assumption that, not assumption, but I think there's always that question of like, how do I know between intuition and anxiety, or you said the ego? It's such a fine line. But what I always say is you can't go wrong just trying, right? Let's not do something massive, but, just try answering yourself in different ways, and then gathering that evidence. Like, okay, so I made that decision when I felt this way, and this is what happened. This is how it unfolded, right? And then the more we do that, we really gather that data, and our life starts to unfold more and more. So
yeah, I love that. Yeah, we can't all be in our head. We have to do, right? We have to take some risks and calculate. Good advice. So Kate, you consider yourself to be intuitively gifted, like psychically gifted. And, even the word gifted could be like pulled apart because we're all gifted. But they're, just like we all have the ability to write and sing, we all have intuition, we all have psychic abilities. But some of us, whether it's from training or whether it's from, maybe, powers and gifts passed down, or a little extra blessing from God, we were able to up level our gifts. And so I want to hear about your intuitive gifts. Like, what do you consider to be your psychic, spidey, senses, and how does that show up for you? Was it, were you born with it? Have you done studying? And I know that because we've taken some classes together, but let everybody else know a little bit of that.
Sure. So I'll start with my, intuitive sense, and then I can go back and talk a little bit more about my relationship with spirit.
Yeah.
But I would say one of my biggest senses is certainly feeling. I am a deep empath, for better or for worse. And so, I think really how that showed up. And like I said, especially as a child, I would really say things as I felt them. And I think I've learned over time, right, that is my experience, and it doesn't have to be somebody else's. And so there's been a little bit more softening of that. But I think the way I saw that always play out in my life is I would get a sense, and it would usually be with a loved, family member, friend, somebody close with me, and I would be able to really feel into a situation and create connection for them. Quite easily, right? And sometimes they would be like, okay, Kate, right? And then it would have, so there's that running joke of like, all right, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And over time, and I realized I love to heal. I love to help others. And that's actually how I made my way into the social work profession was, okay, there's something there. I have the ability to kind of create those connections for people and to help them to also tune into their own right intuition. I think that is the most beautiful work I do is helping people, feel more connected. So anyway, so that was just always innate. I would say, my clairsentience, my claircognizance was just always with me, psychically and really feeling things. Entering homes, I'm deeply connected, as you know, to the land. And homes as well. I've grown. I live in an antique home, and it's so much energy, and so I always had that sense too of just spaces, right? Just feeling into all the different types of energy. So I would say that is one of my biggest strengths. And as a medium, I remember my first experience. I actually heard spirit objectively was around the age of 3 or 4, and so saying this to my parents it wasn't well received. It wasn't poorly received, but they didn't exactly know what to do with it. And so I definitely shut down more of the clairaudience at that time. But I remember growing up, I like in high school, I had my night light on, like in high school, because I knew, right? I knew like if that turns off, I'm going to see something. No, I didn't want to, right? And in that understanding of, I also just remember looking at, might sound bizarre to some people, but energy of items. And I remember looking at a stuffed animal that I was really close to and that I loved. And I'm not sure exactly right the meaning of this, but really feeling like that was alive, or there was something to it, right? And certainly that could have been a loved one connecting with me in that way, because it was such a close object to me. But yeah, so that's just sort of in essence, where things started for me.
That's a lot. I love that. And it's important to realize, and again, I love how some of it is just it's subtle. It's not like, I think sometimes people think intuition or psychic or mediumship, right? It's like, boom, right in front of you. And it's like, no, sometimes it's just this feeling or this little knowing. That's really good. And that's interesting that you have memories from so young, and that you shut down. And I think that that's another motivator of our chat today, right? Like those listening, it's like, no, you're not alone. If you're seeing departed people, if you just clearly know things before they happen, if friends come to you for advice and you just somehow whip up the right thing to say, like you're intuitive, your psychic senses are there, and don't shut them down. There's a community out there. There's people that understand you. And I hope too, from this conversation, we're showing people you can have all of this and be grounded, because what I hear from a lot of people is they get scared. They get scared because they don't want to lose their connection to the earth. They just want to be human. They don't want anything more. And if I do say so myself, I think you and I are brilliant examples. I mean, we're both parents, we're business owners, we've done the academic, rigorous, studying. A lot of what we do is science backed. Like a lot of what we do is left brain and grounded. And then, yes, we do stretch and put that other foot, in heaven on the other side, a little bit more right brain, but you don't need to be scared. And I hear these stories, especially from children too, where they'll close themselves down because they feel like, well, I'm not going to be understood, and I need to be understood by my mom, by society. And so that's it. They don't understand that having a foot in both worlds exist.
Totally beautifully said. And also that brightness, right? You're talking about children, and I think they're all gifted, right? They're all connected. We all are. And unfortunately, sometimes, or I would say most of the time, it gets dampened, right? There's this idea that we don't know how to live our lives connected in that way, or we're going to be ostracized, and social pressure is huge, right? It's so important to be socially accepted, and yet, right, if only we knew, everybody really can
Right,
change.
is.
So yes, it's important.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think it's also figuring out your story, like taking some pause of like, what did happen in my past that might shape my limiting beliefs or my fears, right? And the path to acceptance is like making sense of that story, and then creating the new story, whether it's new terms, new people, because again, that we talk about words from earlier. I mentioned God as an example, but even people hear psychic and they completely shut down, right? Oh, he or she is a wackadoo, and they picture the big crystal ball, right? And the frog's feet in some sort of a cauldron with other types of stuff, right? And it's like, sure, it can be those things, right? But it doesn't have to be. And I love that concept of intuition can be what you create. We have power. It's not just listen or you or others who say, here's how to open your intuition, right? Here's how to become a psychic. It's like you can also figure it out. Tell me, Kate, so in adulthood, so you had some signs that you had some extra abilities, right? But so in adulthood, when did you decide, oh, okay, I'm not honoring these gifts, or I'm done kind of stuffing them in. I'm gonna come out of the spiritual closet, so to speak. Tell me about that.
Absolutely. So, like most people, I've sort of been through bouts of sadness, anxiety, I've moved through that. And during COVID, actually, right? So at the beginning of the pandemic, and this was when my daughter was about a year. And so we were sort of starting to heal from the fear, right?
Yeah.
Constant, like I said, so that constant fight or flight that often sits with NICU moms, and especially through that first year.
Yeah.
And so as I was trying to move through that, I just was still thinking to myself, something is missing, right? Something, I have my beautiful daughter. I have, my supportive husband, I have a beautiful life. I'm helping others. And yet something is not right. Like what? Right? Something is not right. And I actually thought back to my childhood and how in tune I was, how bright I was, how much I shined without really worrying about, what that would mean. And I turned to the tarot, which is so interesting. So this was much more about a curiosity of what is the tarot, right? So I enrolled in a course with the lovely Lindsay Mack through Wild Soul, Tarot for the Wild Soul. And I learned that simply by being present, right? By being present with spirit, so much unloads, so much comes, right? So much right in front of you that like I had no idea how connected I could be with myself. So that was just the tool of opening.
Nice.
Yeah. And, and through that year, the moment I'll never forget was I was in between clients, and we were doing virtual telehealth, and I still do. And I had a horrible migraine, which to me now often is a sort of a sign that somebody is trying to communicate something to me. And I closed my eyes, and my cousin's grandmother and my dear grandfather stepped towards me. And so ever since then, the world of spirit just opened, and I started digging in and learning more about what that actually means for me now that I'm open to it, now that I realize the power and the impact that connecting with myself, connecting with the spirit world. And I've come back, right? I've come back home.
I like that. Oh, I like that.
Yes. How about for you? I'm just curious, when did you realize, okay, this might be a little bit more than, than what you originally thought?
Yeah. So, it's so funny, like everything in hindsight. There were so many clues along the way. I'm not even going to say clues. There was like flashing lights along the way. And I didn't grasp them until recently. Similar to you, I was always the one people came to for advice. Always. People sought me out for anything, right?
Right.
I mean, recipes, I don't cook.
Right.
like relationship advice. Like at the time, like marriage might have needed a rekindling,
Right.
right? Like, it's just so funny, like, work advice, which I can say I've always been, there, but just funny. People would just always like, hey, I know this isn't really your thing, but can I ask you what you think? So people just naturally drawn to me. And what's interesting is then, yeah, me being able to give advice, even though I don't have a subject matter expertise on something. And so that was really all my full 20s, really. But I never associated it with, psychic or intuitive, right? It was just like, but at those years I was operating so busy. I was a workaholic. I was toxic in so many ways. I was a cigarette smoker. I was a Red Bull drinker. Like, again, I wasn't operating at my full. And like, I was just so busy, like the toxic busy, the trauma busy, that I never stopped to be like, maybe I do have a gift. Maybe I should foster this, right? Maybe I should lean into this more. So looking back, those are some clues. More on the direct spiritual side. My dad passed away. I think it's been 8 years, Kate. 8 years. My dad. Oh, dad. And I instantly felt him. Instantly, not even a question. Like, oh, dad's here. Like, just like this warm shimmer, and just that feeling I got with him. Like if I was driving in the car with him, or if we were going out to eat. Like it was just dad. And I just found myself talking to him, and just creating a relationship with him. But again, what's so funny, Kate, is I was not healthy at that point in my life. I didn't like who I was as a mother, as a wife, as a person. And I was just workaholic, that I somehow let that gift fade. And within a few weeks, I almost forgot that I could talk to the departed. And I just went on my, I don't even know what you'd want to call it, my path. It wasn't a path. I just, I was kind of like, I don't know, maybe like a little like the Devil Wears Prada kind of a boss. Just a little mean and scowly, and not heart opened at that point. Grandma passed away, dad's mom, a year later. I'm walking out of work. Kate, I feel her. I'm like, oh my gosh, grandma passed away. And it was not a shock, but I mean, I had just seen her the week before, but she was 96, I want to say. So, I mean, it was time, and she was in the nursing home, but she'd been doing okay. And I just walked out and I was like, oh, grandma passed away. And then sure enough, I got a phone call a few hours later. But again, this is just hilarious, Kate. I still don't think much of it. Like, right. I go back to my 3D, being sour and operating in this mucky world. And so you asked, when did I realize, right? So even though all of this has happened, I can honestly say I didn't fully realize that I had a gift until just a few years ago. I lost my job, and I lose my job, Kate, and I've had emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse happen, right? It doesn't nearly do as big of a job on me, but I lose my job, and now all of a sudden my ego stripped. I realize all the trauma that I have held, I've been putting into my job. So with no job, all of a sudden I start getting signs and synchronicities from the universe. And I am committed, now that I have nothing blinding me. I have no excuse not to do the hard work, to say, I surrender. I realize you're talking to me. I realize you've been trying to talk to me for years, but I've been too busy. But I promise, Spirit, like I'm not too busy now. Like there's no bullshit now. Like, message received. And since then, it sparked what I refer to as a dark night of the soul. And since that dark night, I have been continuously linked with Spirit. I haven't forgotten my link. I haven't been too busy. Wow, I just like felt everything as I explained. I hope that gives you a sense of like my journey.
Me too. And just how profound. And I think, how much really when listening to this, what I'm thinking too and feeling is how much your body had to change. Right?
Yes. You
Yeah.
must be psychic, Kate.
Yeah.
You're so spot on. Yes.
Yeah.
Lots of
Like,
body change. You're right.
Yep. It's a whole transformation, right? It's like the chrysalis, right? I mean, we can really look to nature, I think, for a lot of spiritual symbols, and that is it, right? It's like things that we didn't even know needed change, needed shifting, just happen once you surrender. It's like, this is where I'm at. And then it's incredible to see, like, oh my goodness, wow, okay, guess we're moving, we're moving in this direction, we're shifting in this direction. And that's where that trust comes in, right? So speaking to all of you, like, if you have those gut instincts, if you're starting to listen more, just follow it, right? And be open for that change, because the radical shift does happen. It does.
Yeah. I love how you said be open to change. And I think that was the difference when I lost my job.
Yeah.
I was being offered opportunities to change, right? Like, hey, like you can connect with the departed, right? Like, hey, you can connect with people on a deeper level, but I never took it to a change of behavior, right? So again, physically, right? I was a cigarette smoker and I'm a Red Bull drinker, right? And I'm too busy for the gym, right? Like all of those things, like so many invitations to change, right? Or to lean into something. And that job loss for me, like, was the loss that really was like, okay, Danielle, you need to change, you need to listen. And loss is so hard, and there's no way around it, whether it's a loss of a job, a loss of a loved one, a loss of a relationship. But do think that is such a beautiful opportunity. Sometimes when we're isolated, and sometimes when we are stripped from who we think we are, right? It really does give us this beautiful opportunity to shift and to change. And from my experience working with clients who might have a hard time accepting their intuition, their psychic gifts, or even more basic, accepting that they're worthy of love, accepting that they're divinely supported, right? The biggest challenge is they don't make the changes needed. They might know what to do, right? It might be, okay, you need to create more boundaries, you need to kick him or her to the curb, right? You need to stop watching 10 hours a day of Netflix, like whatever it is, they know, but they actually don't change. And so one way to accept and really honor intuitive gifts and those psychic hits is to say, okay, I get it. What can I do to foster this?
Yeah. Yes. And taking it slow.
Love that.
Does not happen overnight. And the last thing I want, and I say this to clients all the time, the last thing I want is for you to not feel safe through this, right?
Yeah.
And to feel like you're diving headfirst, because if anything, that's just going to pull you further away, right? It's going to activate that fight or flight. Your bodies are meant to feel safe. So, go slow.
Yeah.
Take it one tiny minute decision, right? Tiny change at a time, so that you can build your confidence with your own self, right? When we're talking about intuition, it's you. It's you and you alone, right? So you're in the driver's seat, and just take the time you need. Doesn't have to happen overnight.
Love it. Yes, go slow.
Yes.
I'm like here chuckling. I remember I lose my job and I'm seeing signs and synchronicities from the universe. And I did the opposite of go
Right.
slow. I'm like, I'm going to own a spiritual business within a year. I'm going to learn Reiki. I'm going to be a Reiki master, right? Like all of a sudden, I'm like thinking I'm like the next Buddha, right? And again, talk about ego. That's like the other side of ego, right?
Yeah,
Where it's
yeah,
like, no, why don't you just sit in this moment, Danielle,
right.
right? And enjoy. And so there is no rush. It really is about the journey, and it's accepting the fact. And this was hard for me on my spiritual journey. When I was really even when my dad passed away, and then when I got those hits later on, and staying in it was, how can I be okay with my human, right? I've got a bad temper, I cuss, right? Like, the list goes on and on. Like, I've got some dark things about me, and yes, they've softened over the years, but that was hard for me too, because when I was leaning into the spiritual side, and I am a type A perfectionist type person, sometimes I'd be like, oh my God, I can't eat bacon anymore. That's an animal. That's sacred. Spirit, are you going to be mad at me that I'm eating bacon? Like, oh crap, I just yelled at my kid. I'm supposed to be spiritual, right? Like, it's like just this hyper craziness. And I'd also love to give that as a message, like, as you're accepting your, psychic self, your intuitive self, your spiritually linked in self, like just like deep breaths in, remember, also accept your human, right? And let them coexist for sure. And so I see smiling on your side. I'm taking a guess you went through similar.
Huge. And it's because, right, it's so exciting. There's like that excitement of like, wow, this actually works, right? All that, in today's society, it's like that mindfulness, right? I mean, that's really what we're asking. So it's like, oh, they told me this would happen, and now it's happening. And so I don't want this to go. This is really nice. This is like, this feels really good. And that fear of like losing it.
Yes.
Really
yes,
take
over.
It is. Yeah. It's that fear of, if I don't listen to everything, and if I don't connect every time in this way, right? I have, and I'm not sure about you, I'm assuming so. I have weeks and months sometimes still. I mean, maybe not months, but I have weeks when I'm like, I am just a little checked out. I am just I am in my human self, right? And it's okay. It's absolutely okay to be here. I'm moving through something. I'm distracted. I have like my kids to take care of, right? They're sick. I am not there, right? I am absolutely not there. However, the moment I come back, it's like, right? And then they're like, okay, well, we were telling you.
It's like riding a bike, right? Once you're there, it's like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Hey, we were saying 2 weeks ago,
I was busy, right?
I let it go by, and it'll come back around.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the trust. It's the trust.
Yeah, there's no fear with intuition and spirit. And so I love that. And you're right. If they're trying to get your attention and you're just like, nope, like I am going to have that ice cream and Netflix binge, right? I am not open for business. I don't care what you have to say. You're right. They're always there. They don't leave us, right? I mean, it's just unconditional love. And again, even if that spiritual side isn't fully connecting with the audience, we don't leave ourselves, our higher self, our intuitive selves. We can dim it for sure, right? With the Netflix 10-hour binge, but we're always there if we want to sit. I today still fall trap, although I've also done a lot of work in this area, trying to balance my human and intuitive spiritual side, is not over focusing. And I think we hit on this a little bit earlier, like what others say. A big thing that comes up in the psychic mediumship world in particularly is meditation. Meditation is critical. To be good at your craft, you need to meditate. And I just don't have one of those minds. Like, I am always percolating. I mean, this is me actually pretty chill today, right? Like, I'm usually like and like my mind is always going. Now, that doesn't mean I don't practice mindfulness, right? I go out for a walk and I lean into the sound of a squirrel running up a tree, or the birds chirping, or maybe in the shower, I just kind of sing, and my intuition's good. That's all I need to recharge. Like, that's all I need. But then my mind will go, well, I could be a better medium if I spent 5 hours a week in meditation, right? And so I just encourage people to again know, like, your ego saying like you should be doing this. That's not your intuition. Like, tap into what you need, because while meditation, as an example, works for so many people, and it's a beautiful, beautiful modality to lean into and strengthen, if it's your cup of tea, it's not the only way. And I think a part of accepting our intuitive selves is asking ourselves, what do you need today? I can get probably more power from a 3-minute meditation, just putting a 3-minute alarm on my phone and really quieting my mind and eye for 3 minutes, because I do it and I do it well, as opposed to doing 30 minutes. Have you fallen trap to that too, where you're like, oh, well, the spiritual gurus say this, right?
Yes, or like that it needs to be a regular practice, like the exact same thing over and over and over again, right? We are ever evolving, and I think having things, it's all about accessibility, right? It's all about what feels good. If it doesn't feel good, if it doesn't feel right, you're not going to do it, right? So where are we getting, right? We're getting nowhere. And then there's that disconnect with our own selves, which is exactly what we don't want, right? So absolutely, and I've had my months when I have a deep meditation practice, right? And I feel great. And then I have months when I don't tune in at all in that way, right? Instead, it is in the everyday moments. I think of like, feeding my son and just sitting there. Right.
Yes.
Like just being, like I said, just being
present.
just being with them. That's when I feel close to spirit, right? Or close to myself, right? So my intuition is right there, just waiting to be heard. So yes, throw any of those notions out that, it has to be regular, it has to be hard. It doesn't always have to be hard too.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Take what works.
I like that. I bet you everyone here listening has that psychic, that intuitive gift, and they might be like wanting, like, well, here's the 20 steps to improve it. And it's really the opposite. It's like, no, it doesn't need to be hard. Like, here's some things to consider. Here's some things to lean into. The intuition's easy, which sometimes makes it hard, right? Because we are used to, fighting, or, just having to control things, or just to overextend ourselves. And so I love that. And while we're not going to give people 20 things to do, and we've naturally popcorned a bunch, like, what would you say, short and sweet, for those who are like, wow, okay, like, I understand intuition more, I understand spirit more, I really want to start accepting this part of me? What are a few things that you'd say, like, go out and try this, do this, consider this?
Yeah. So I don't even know if I have a few, but maybe you can, honestly, biggest and best, I think the easiest thing you can do is check in with yourself. So, 30 seconds, if it's for you, setting that alarm at the same time every day, and asking, just like you said, asking yourself, like, what do I need to do today? How do I want to move through my day? Setting that tiny, tiny intention, because the second that intention is set, you're open.
Yes.
You're inviting, right? So I really feel like that is one of the simplest ways that we can make sure to move through our day, because we're moving through with intention. Right.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, intention. Yes. What would I say? I don't know. I'd probably encourage people to have fun too. Play, create some activities for yourself, right? And just see what happens, right? Sit and be like, who's going to call me today? And then just like see, like who pops into your mind? Is it Tina? Is it Larry? Right? And scribble it down in a journal and just see, do they call? And here's the thing, don't judge yourself if they don't, right? And so that also helps with your intuition, is being comfortable to have a lighthearted prediction as an example, but not judging yourself, right? And with psychic mediumship, that's a big thing that we learn. So when we're connecting with departed loved ones on the other side and working with clients, it's inevitable we get no's from our clients, right? Maybe I'll say like, oh, okay, well, grandpa's telling me he's there's something about a mountain. I think maybe he lived close to the mountains. And then somebody says, no, I don't understand that. It's a key point of my psychic and intuitive development, not to fear that no. It's me being like, oh, okay, interesting. Let me feel again. Let me lean into this again and see if I can understand. So I also think it's like, create some games, even if you have like a deck of good old fashioned playing cards, right?
Yep.
Just start flipping. Is it going to be red? Is it going to be black? Is it going to be a 5? Is it going to be a 3? I think all of those things can get you a little more in touch with your intuition. These days, I like to, and I never get the validation, and that's okay. Like if I'm at a store, I just like to see like, oh, I bet you she's got 3 kids, or
Yeah.
you know, I bet you she's just got a new job. And it's not even me being psychically linked in. It's just like feeling the energy of someone and creating a story and just trusting it. Like, okay, that's real, you know?
Yep. Like, and I was just thinking, like, you know, most of us go to the grocery store. So, you know, you're going to the cash register. What's their name tag? Right? What's their name? What letter does it start with? Leaning into that, right? I mean, there's so many things that we can ask ourselves beforehand and get that validation, right?
Yeah. And make it fun. And everyone's going to be good or be able to lean in and connect in a different way. Like you said, you're a big feeler, right? So that's how you get a lot of your intuitive messages. Some are going to be able to just know like the details, right? So you might be able to sense something about an emotion. So maybe it's not name tag. Maybe people can also play with, okay, when you're in aisle 4, you start thinking, is my cashier going to be friendly or rude? Right?
Exactly.
Because some of us get that data of like that feeling. I think that's also absolutely brilliant. I feel like we could continue talking, but sadly we can't. We're coming to a wrap. Is there anything, closing messages you want to give to the people on accepting their beautifully awesome intuitive gifts?
Gosh, I just think the biggest thing is just lean, you know, you all have it. We all have it. And
Yes.
so if you feel called to connecting more, and if you don't, that's also okay. Right?
Yes,
Right?
love
That
it.
is okay. Life will do this. So
Yes.
be exactly where you are and in the time that you're in. Just, you know, as I shared, it's like I had to move through that to come back. Right? So we're all exactly where we need to be.
Yes.
And if you feel like you want to tune in, it's right there waiting for you, for sure.
Well said. Yeah, I'll echo that. You don't need to be a psychic medium to be intuitively linked in or to offer your beautiful gifts in a certain way. Classes and books are fantastic. They're also not needed. They should be nice enhancements to your journey. Have conversations like this, be a part of conversations like this. Get curious, right? Maybe go to a psychic mediumship demonstration if you've never gone to one. Maybe experience a new modality that incorporates intuition, perhaps Reiki or some life coaching. Just get curious and see what feels right to you. And so with that, Kate, thank you. This has been so fun. I've learned so much about you.
Same, and love being with your beautiful community. And of course, your energy and your light is always shining, Danielle. So thank you so much for letting me be here.
Perfect. We're going to close up. Just want to remind everyone, Onwards with Dr. Danielle is live every Friday, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Win Win Women Network. You can go directly on Win Win Women Network's website, and you can find the show, or you can go directly to my website, drdannielleclark.com. Go under Onwards, the show, and every Friday we're going to be there live. Again, I want to invite you to learn more about me at drdannielleclark.com, and Kate at
KateStacom.com.
Awesome, beautiful. And we're sending you lots of love, light, and healing energy, and hope to connect with you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, my friends.
Bye.